Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I have often pondered over this whole issue that, why is women's mental health given so much more importance than, say, men's mental health? In fact, there are societies for women's mental health, there are books on women's mental health, but
In this country, or you're talking
in this
globally?
country as well. So, for example, the Indian Psychiatric Society has a task force on women's mental health, but does not have a task force on men's mental health. So, obviously, there is an issue here. Gender can, modify manifestations of mental health problems in so many ways. So, I'm sure there are men who have mental health problems as well, and men have unique mental health problems. They have problems of their own. But I think the reason why women's mental health has become such an important issue is, one, women outnumber men in terms of the number of women who have depression, say, which is the commonest condition in the world in terms of mental health problems. So,
So are you telling me that women are more prone to certain categories of
That's
mental
right.
health
That's
issues?
right.
And is there a biological basis for that, or it's both biological and social?
Well, I try to look at it as a triangle, really. So you have the biological, you have the social and cultural. So I think both are quite mixed with each other. And the third is actually psychological. So women are made differently from men psychologically. And this is not just about the biology and the social construction of gender. But there are ways in which women cope with their problems and issues, the way they communicate, the way they internalize their problems, which are uniquely women. So I think it's like a triangle with the woman in the middle, and all of these in some way contribute to her strength as well as to her vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities, yeah.
I think probably maybe that is one reason why women's mental health becomes that much more unique, because life stages, including reproductive life stages, in some way determine the path that women's health, particularly mental health, will take. But all kinds of health. So even physical health is quite determined by life stages. So for example, puberty seems to be like a key turning point for young girls. And before puberty, boys and girls have the same rates of most disorders, particularly depression, anxiety. And then suddenly at puberty, there's a peak. And girls have 4 times more the chances of developing depression as compared to boys. So something's happening there.
So, doctor, let's talk about women, not just as a broad brush word, because it's really about womanhood than about women. And that starts with the girl child being born to puberty, to the time that she grows up, to the time that you go through the reproductive cycle, and then thereafter. So depending on the different phases, do you see different kinds of challenges and issues as far as mental health for women is concerned?
Yeah, I think that's a very key issue. I mean, let's start from birth till puberty. That's one phase which I think is very important. Not given as much attention as it should. In a lot of families, when a girl child is born, there is not necessarily a lot of jubilation, particularly in some situations. And quite often, a girl may not be given the kind of importance that she should be given, or the kind of expectations that are there from her. May be very different compared to the boy child. So I think a lot of girls, even when they are very young, grow up with a sense of not being sort of second grade citizens, so to say, even in the family. And the kind of roles given to them are also not very empowering. They're expected to be quiet and seen, not heard kind of situations. And that's true for many families. So I think that's one area which creates that vulnerability. Like, as she enters the family, she's not very sure whether she's wanted or not.
Kind of set her up to be an unsure individual,
That's right.
irrespective of a mental health issue.
That's right. So that creates a vulnerability, sort of not being valued and validated in some way in the family setup. And then after that, we also know the chances of abuse, sexual abuse, are much, much more among young girls compared to, say, young boys. And that, if it happens, then that creates a vulnerability, especially if when she tries to disclose, or she's not given the kind of protection she needs, then, or if she tells somebody and it's not believed, then that again creates a kind of trauma, which is a second vulnerability. So if you've had, and in case the family is not very well knit, it has its own issues, parents are not there for the children, then that's a third vulnerability, which of course may be common to boys and girls. But if the girl has come in with a set of vulnerabilities, then that adds on to it. And then comes puberty. Now,
Yes.
puberty by itself is a very positive change for a girl. All the good things are happening. She's growing in the right direction. But hormonally and for the brain, it creates a certain kind of problem, which increases her vulnerability to develop some specific problems. Specifically, I think depression is 4 times more common in girls at puberty. So that's something which is like a tip
4 times compared to boys.
compared to boys.
Okay.
Well, I think everybody's responsibility is to ensure that a woman has good mental health. But if I had to choose that one group, I would say it's the men, because I think women, are part of men's lives in so many ways, and I think they are also part of the risk. So, a lot of vulnerability happens because of the men. Men are the partners whom women can communicate to. So, I would say that, fathers, brothers, partners, husbands, sons are my sort of target group most of the time. If they understand a woman's vulnerabilities, try to look beyond just the anger or the anguish or the anxiety or the inability to do things, and try and understand what's going on behind that. Where is this woman coming from, what has she been subject to, how her strengths, her inner resources, and tries to sort of energize that rather than focusing on her weaknesses, protecting her yet strengthening her, and recognizing that a woman is actually very strong, very resilient, and trying to sort of make sure that that resilience comes through. Despite the fact that she has a mental illness or depression or whatever, she's still trying to survive. She's somebody who's trying to fight with the system. So I think if men can do that, that would be the
So
one.
you basically enlist the support of the 50% of the 1.3 billion
That's right.
people. And that's kind of counterintuitive, because we tend to think about women's problems as women's problems. But you were saying bring the men into the picture.
Definitely.
And that certainly brings a new dimension to a new dimension. So thank you so much,
Thank you.
Doctor, and it's a pleasure to have you on the
Thank
show.
you. My pleasure.